So first of all, welcome everyone to our lunch meeting 4797, but more importantly, our first online meeting in our 98 years history of the Rotary Club of Adelaide. Today, we're broadcasting from many locations, and we expect that the Zoom technology will work as planned and allow us to deliver an enjoyable experience for you all. A very special welcome to our guest speaker, the Honourable Chris Schacht, who past President Peter Neal will more formally introduce later in the meeting. Welcome also to the many visiting Rotarians I see, as well as guests that are participating, and all of you, of course, members of the club. You can see, you've got a list, you can see all the people that are participating at the moment in there and get an idea from there. I've got to, just as usual, birthday greetings. Graham Lee, his birthday, I know he's connected as well, and his birthday was on Sunday. So happy birthday, Graham, for Sunday. Austin Taylor, I don't know if Austin is connected. I understood he was going to join today. It's his birthday today. Happy birthday to Austin. And Peter Crowell, whose birthday is tomorrow. Happy birthday to you all. Also celebrating anniversary this week, we've got Gildy Carty, 1 year, and Irene McDonald, 4 years. So congratulations to both of you. As usual, please keep in touch with all of our activities via our social media channel. Facebook and WhatsApp groups seem to be the one that are working best at the moment. So those two channels are really important to stay in touch. And of course, we will keep communicating to all you all via our new MailChimp distribution channel by emails. Many of you might ask, when will our regular meeting resume? The truth is, we just don't know. It will depend on how well the virus will be contained. And right now, we are in the capable hands of our government. Please be reassured that we will meet again face-to-face as soon as it is considered safe and allowed by the authorities. We will keep you informed along the way and hope you will enjoy the new ways of communicating our regular weekly meetings. I refer to the federal and state government announcement regarding tighter restrictions being imposed because of the escalating COVID-19 pandemic. These restrictions are to keep us all safe, to protect those most at risk, and to limit the impact of the growing number of cases that we will have on our health systems. As Rotarians, we can all encourage others to respect these restrictions. Rotary Adelaide has moved to implement online meetings so that conveners, team leaders, group captains can endeavor to keep members engaged. This so we can continue to deliver our commitment, our committed humanitarian service outcomes. Most of all, we need to know that our members and their loved ones continue to be well. And so I call on members to reach out to their fellow members and specifically ask group captains to develop a communication strategy to know that their members are safe and to keep connected with them. On Monday, our board met online for the first time using Zoom, this same setup and technology that we're using today. And we are aiming to conduct all of our committees and team meetings in a similar manner. And the details of how this can be accomplished and how all of you can use this technology will be made available to you by the conveners and team leaders as we progress. And as a reminder, we are recording these online meetings and they will be available on our social media channels and website as a podcast in a day or so. Please enjoy your lunch, and let's keep the chat going now between ourselves while obviously we get the guest speaker online. And don't forget, you can also still donate via a link we've set up on the website, a page. So the usual bowls donation that we collect normally at week lunches and that allow us to do some community service work is still possible. There is a link. I'm just going to copy and paste the link into the chat. We did send that link as well. So I'm just putting it into the chat now. And you can just click there, and there are the pre-donation amounts set up from $5 upwards, but there is also an empty amount, so you can put whatever you like. I will now just stop my intro, and we can just chat until we get information that the guest speaker is ready to go, so that Peter can introduce him.
Chris is going to talk to us now for about 15 minutes or so, maybe a bit longer, and obviously going to ask questions, or we want to ask him some questions, which we can do one of two ways. We can type them in the chat room on your page, or you can wave like fury, and I'll try and recognise people to ask Chris some questions. By way of introduction, in a difficult world of political coverage in the media, we seem to have lost the real characters in politics. Our speaker today is one such character. Never afraid to speak his mind, to open dialogue with a wide range of people, and indeed even talk to journalists. He enjoyed support from a wide span of the community in his role as a federal senator for 15 years, and of course his hard work in the support of volleyball internationally. Indeed, he continues to challenge society in his journal writing, his lobbying, his popping up at bank AGMs, and even at Royal Commissions. Today we'll be able to draw information from someone who has, as they say, been there, done that. Chris has not only visited China on numerous occasions in many roles, he's widely read on China, its people and philosophies. We're indeed privileged to welcome to this very special Rotary Club of Adelaide meeting the Honourable Chris Schacht. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Pete. Well, first of all, I apologise that I wasted your time trying to connect. That just proves that I'm in an age that still this information world is still a bit beyond me, and I apologise. First of all, I enjoy the opportunity to have a discussion more than a speech. As Pete said, I've been to China about, in the last 30 years, 60, 70 times in various capacities, both as a guest of the Chinese Communist Party, leading human rights delegations to China, representing Australian volleyball in international meetings in China, leading trade missions to China as a federal minister, and being on trade missions and being there as a tourist. I've built up my own level of contacts in China within the party and within the government and the community. First of all, but I paraphrase or say I don't claim to be an expert on China. I have a bad ear, and I've never been able to learn much of their language to speak it, but I have done a lot of reading on books that have been translated into English. So I'm not an expert on China, but I am very interested in China and enjoy the place despite its many challenges. I want to just today to say, put in context three things. One, you can't deal with China unless you know its history. A lot of business people, a lot of others really come a gutser to use that word in China because they have no idea of the history of China, how it works, and they have no idea of how the 10 dynasties that have run China for the last 4,000 years, how in fact the Communist Party of China, in my view, is in fact the 12th dynasty of China's long history. So I want to give a brief context about the history, then about the role of this present dynasty, the Communist Party, how it works, etc. Then finish with some comments about some of the most astonishing things about the Chinese economy, the Chinese society. First of all, about the dynasties, and I know this might bore some of you, but it's unavoidable if you want to have a grip about China and understand the place. The first dynasty, which recorded around 2200 BC, that was the Shi dynasty, and then we go right through all the major dynasties till in 1949, the Communist Party took power. Most of the major dynasties of China lasted about 300 years each before they collapsed and then were replaced by another dynasty. But most of the dynasties all continued the major characteristics of China how it was managed, how it worked, etc. Even though they had different names, and at different times, different dynasties, new dynasties when they came in. For example, when the Qin dynasty, the last big one before the communists, which were the Manchus, when they took over in 1644, in the first few years, they were ruthless in rooting out opposition, murdering people who were dissenters, burning millions of books, etc. Almost like a variation of Pol Pot back to year zero. But gradually they became Chinified or Sinified, just as Mao, when he took over, destroyed a lot of things of institutions, but then gradually, as always happens with these dynasties, they become Chinified, Sinofied, and the major one that example is when the Mongols in the 13th century took over China, got rid of the Song dynasty, and the Mongols led by famous one of all, Kublai Khan. But gradually they became Chinese in the way they ran it. They only lasted 100 years and petered out and were replaced. So that's the first issue, and I won't go any further. There are plenty of books. In fact, you can go on the internet and get very good websites, very good information very quickly. But I discovered, though I don't speak the language, which is a difficulty at times, because I showed interest in Chinese history, and when I was asked to make the proverbial toast to toast friendship, if I always put it in context of an understanding of Chinese history, whether I was doing business or politics or whatever, I got great recognition and respect that I'd taken the trouble, because most Westerners, when they go to China, really are ignorant of their history, and the Chinese are very proud of their history. This leads me to the structure of the Communist Party and how it operates as a one-party state, as China has always been a one-party state. In the Tang Dynasty, 600-700 AD, they adopted Confucianism as not the state religion, but as the state culture. And Confucianism is a theme that over the last 1500 years has run through Chinese history and the running of the place. Confucianism talks about the harmony of society, people working together, keeping calm, and they use the word harmony and a harmonious society. This is what the Communist Party are quite happy to pick up, because they take the Confucian view that you have a structure from the top down, you follow your elders, you follow your seniors, you follow your bosses, and that's how it all is kept together. It's not accidental that the Chinese Communist Party has made a government, and their film industry has made many movies about Confucian, about the history, and all of them are the same thing, about how China is a big country, organized and run well by the Communist Party and by previous dynasties. And they point out that between dynasties, when there was chaos and civil war, we don't want to go back to that. Now, the Communist Party, and I found this on many times when I've had business people with me in China, I've explained that if you want to do business in China, you cannot do business unless somewhere in an appropriate level of the Communist Party, they give you approval. I've sat with Australian business people talking to a Chinese business person, and the Chinese business person is very polite, very, very nice, listens, doesn't say no at anything. But what you know is going to happen before they will do anything serious with someone from business from overseas, they will go and get appropriate approval within the system. Now, this is not something we have in Australia, and I don't support the Chinese system in that way, because it does lead to other antisocial features, above all corruption. But you cannot do business in China unless the party has given you a tick for it. So I've always taken Chinese business people, Australian business people to China. One of the first appointments I try to get is with an appropriate level official of the party. The party itself runs as it's not separated from the government like we are in Australia. Political parties are separated from the government. You win an election, you have a period of government, then you have another election, whether you win or lose, etc. In China, you can get one year you can be the governor of a province at a very senior position, and then you'll be transferred to become the party secretary of another province, which is even a higher appointment. So people transfer backwards and forwards between government positions and the party positions. Got to remember, the Communist Party of China has about 85 million members, which is a massive organization. And that all of those, whole structure is top down. And I'll just go quickly. The very top body in China is called the Standing Committee of the Politburo. It has between 7 and 9 members, and it meets at least once a week. Whether it's by like this Skype or whether they meet around a table in Beijing or people are traveling, they usually meet formally once a week. And in that week, many of them will have phone calls and contacts with each other to discuss. That is the only body in China that ultimately might have a vote. If there are 7 members as present, it might actually be a show of hands round the table, 4-3, 3-4. But once the decision is taken, they all agree with it. They all agree with it. Underneath that is the Politburo for the Standing Committee. Below that is the Central Committee, has 230 people from all over China. It meets several times a year. All of these usually in secret. And below that, every couple of years, to 2 or 3, is the National Congress of the party, which has over 3,000 members. Now, the point is, no one at the bottom level elects the delegates to go to the next level. It's an informal choice and discussion and lobbying, but there's no actual ballot as we would discuss it. And that process of the structure of the Communist Party at the central level is repeated in parallel at the province level, at the suburb city level, and even down to the village level. At the village level, they have what's called a cell, which might have 20 or 30 members in a town of 30,000, or 3,000, sorry, and they will provide advice and comment, and someone from there will be selected to go to the next level from time to time. So the Communist Party, as a one-party state, runs very much, and they say, like Confucius has said, advice, a harmonious way, creating prosperity, everyone getting together. It has one extraordinary disadvantage, as we all know about one-party states. It relies on a heavy hand against those who dissent from the system. And there is no doubt that China's human rights abuses, as we would call them, are significant. And when I led 2 human rights delegations to China in the early 90s, after Tiananmen Square, arguing about human rights, the Communist Party response from at very senior levels was, "Ah, yes, Mr. Schacht, or Senator, you're concerned about the human rights, so are we. We have taken 600 million people out of starving poverty, and they all have enough food to live, they all have enough clothing, we're now educating them, etc. That is the improvement in human rights." And then they say, when China, we were forced to take opium from the British commercially, opium wars, when there were signs in Shanghai in reserved areas for Europeans saying, no dogs or Chinese allowed. Why were you in the West concerned about our human rights then? So that's their answer, that they have improved the human rights of hundreds of millions of people by people being able to live a better life. But conversely, it does allow with this system that for corruption. And Xi Jinping, the present president, his view is very clear. Unless the party stops this corruption and gets it under control, in the end, the corruption will destroy the legitimacy of the Communist Party. Of course, he uses anti-corruption drives on many occasions to put lock up some of his other senior members of the party who may be a challenge to him. And those people get done for corruption, not for dissent, and that's how he gets rid of a lot of people. But it's not unusual, by the way. For 3,000 years, emperors have always done that. So once you get that understanding, and what is that it's a one-party state with all the anti-social features that we know that anti-democratic, but we have to acknowledge that the Chinese, since Deng Xiaoping took over after Mao in the late 1970s, China, the living standards of ordinary Chinese people, other than in a democratic sense, access to education, health, food, clothing, jobs, has been the most dramatic in the history of the world. And it is true, people accept 600 million people have come out of pretty well bad, abject poverty. The Chinese ability to continue to do this is always how they're going in the future. And in the end, as a growing educated middle class appear and get stronger and stronger, will they accept the no political dissent? Will they accept always being told? I have received over the years, many people inside the party have told me that they are restless about the way the party controls them. They all know that if you want to be very successful in the public service, in business, you've got to join the party. And you've got to, as one of them said, we are sick of going to these monthly propaganda meetings, ideological meetings, sitting for 2 or 3 hours, hearing about the ideology of socialism and communism, when everybody knows we're all out there trying to make a quid, make a dollar, as I would paraphrase it. How this will go in the future, the party is utterly petrified that if the economy collapses and there is again mass poverty, mass unemployment, there will be a rising up in their dynasty, that is the Communist Party, would be overturned and chaos may come. A lot of people in the West have predicted this chaos for the last 20 years, but it hasn't occurred. And I think an example of how the Chinese people cope is how they've handled the coronavirus. It is no doubt that I think the Chinese statistics are a bit pretty dodgy about how many people have been infected, how many have died, but how they locked up Wuhan in Hebei province, and the people accepted it as what they had to do for the sake of the community and the society, shows you the innate strength of Confucianism culture, the culture of China itself as a country. I just want to finish now, Peter, on a couple of things, figures that I think just give a bearing of where China is today and where its strength is. I looked up the other day and found that the top banks in America, all the banks in China, have total deposits totaling $28 trillion US. That's more money than the rest of the world almost put together. And that is deposits in the banks. And all of those banks are owned and run by the government, even though they compete with each other, ultimately they're government owned. That enormous amount of money in deposits is available to the Chinese government to do things, whatever they want. And that's why the development of Xi Jinping's, the Belt and Road Initiative, and also the massive infrastructure. Thirdly, that money is a basis for their investment all around the world to create a Chinese economic system, above all, making sure they've got supplies of raw materials to keep their industry going. Just to give you an idea, I added up yesterday, our 4 major banks in Australia, the total capitalisation, their prices have gone down in the last month, of course, but it's about just over 250 billion. That's the total value on the share market of our 4 major banks. There are banks in China that have trillions of dollars. If they were allowed and they wanted to, they could buy outright our 4 banks for over morning tea discussion in China. That's just to give you the size. And even that compared with America. The infrastructure, We all seen the incredible physical, the stuff on the TV, on internet stories of their infrastructure building of train lines, roads, airlines, etc. The biggest infrastructure development in China, which is not given much publicity, is a major program that's the biggest engineering works in the world at the moment, to shift a large amount of water out of the Yangtze River in the south up to the north into the Huanghe River and the drought areas all around Inner Mongolia, Beijing, etc., which are now running short of water. That people can't estimate, they don't exactly, but that project alone is running into hundreds of billions of dollars. You can see shots of it on the internet, these enormous canals, and the way they built the system to get the water over 2 mountain ranges out of the Yangtze Basin into the Huanghe. Magnificent engineering. But the other thing many of us have noticed, China now spends as much interest in the education, the training, the social development in infrastructure, not just in road, rails, water, airports, etc., though they're all there. And in that area, their education system is slowly getting better, but its major inhibition to really go is the whole Confucian structure. But we are now seeing a lot more younger Chinese people coming to the West, studying, getting the culture of argument, advancement, development of how you promote ideas, etc. That is a threat to the Chinese Communist Party, but they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. They need all of these bright young people to continue to run the economy. I will finish, Pete, on a point about population. The Chinese population at the moment is 1.35 million, give or take 100,000 or something, a couple of million, but 1.35 billion. Of that, 1.3 billion identify as Han Chinese. Only about 50 to 70 million are actually ethnic minorities. It is a homogeneous society, overwhelmingly. They identify, whether you live in the far south, the far north, you are identified as Han Chinese. And so that is something about an advantage for the Chinese party, the Communist Party, that it is a homogeneous. It doesn't excuse the fact of what they're doing in Tibet, in Xinjiang province with those minorities. About the population, I came across a book the other day, I haven't read it yet, but I saw some discussion called The Empty Planet. Came out end of last year by 2 demographers who are overwhelmingly predicting that the world's population is going to stabilize around 8 to 9 billion over the rest of this century. Why? Because women are getting educated, urbanization, etc. And when women get some access to information, they don't want to have 8 kids, they want to have 2 or even less. One of the things they point out and predict, China at the moment has a fertility rate of only 1.5. You need about 2.2, according to these people, to 2.5 to grow your population or even maintain it. Therefore, they predict over the next 70, 80 years, China's population will drop to under 1 billion people. And you can imagine what that does. I also predict that for most of the world, for it. But how is China dealing with that? That's why they're investing so heavily in information technology, in high-level technology and manufacturing, because they know they won't have enough people for it. So I recommend that book called The Empty Planet. You look it up on Google. It's a broader issue than just China. So I've gone too long. I think they were the 3 major areas I thought, put it in context. I finish. I am not an expert on China. I've just been there 60 odd times or more. I enjoy going. I enjoy the Chinese people at a personal level. I've got a number of friends for it. So I'll leave it there, Pete, and be willing to take questions, comments, and or abuse.
Thank you, Chris. We're going to run on a little because I don't think those people are in a rush to get away. but people can feel free to leave. But I think many of us want to stay on and hear your questions. I'm going to open the batting by referring to a comment that we made in our briefing the other day, Chris. I alluded to the fact that the interweb seems to be full of conspiracy theories, that the Wuhan and the COVID and everything was a plot to take over the world. You gave a very interesting insight to that question. Would you like to share it with us?
Well, first of all, the internet, unfortunately, one of the downsides of the internet, it's available for every crackpot theory, conspiracy theory anyone wants to think of in the world, and you put it on the internet and away it goes. There is, in my view, no reason why the Chinese would be interested in letting loose the coronavirus in the world. Why? Because it's going to destroy the world's economy. And China is the major exporting country in the world to the rest of the world. Why would you wreck the economies, close them down, when you are dependent on so many of your industries and jobs on making the products and the services that the rest of the world wants to buy from you? Secondly, why would you close the world down when you have to buy so much of materials, raw materials and other services from around the world to keep your economy going? In my view, it's not rational. And the Chinese believe strongly in world trade because they need it for both the development of their own industry and the supply of material. Australia, why would they want to knock Australia, stop them selling us selling them iron ore or whatever else? So the Chinese, the reason I think, if I had to make a criticism of China and the government, is that they have ignored, in health terms, the black market in live food, animals, what we'd call exotic foods, where if you go to, and I've been in towns in China, where you can go and buy any range of live animals, buy them, have them slaughtered in front of you, take them home, cook them, or whatever else for food. Now, I've been in streets in Guangzhou, the major city in Guangdong province. The whole street for 100 metres sold nothing else but small live turtles, live. And you stood there for a while and watched people come along on the way home from work and just buy these live turtles, put them in take them home, tied up and cook them. Now, there is no doubt that the Chinese government should clamp down on that and make sure there are proper health regulations, because it appears that it's said that the virus came out of some of these wild animals that were collected and sold on the black market to people in China. Now, it is true, the Chinese will eat anything. Their history is, when you've had famine after famine they've had in 3,000 years, anything that you can eat, no matter what it is, you will have a go at. And that's part of their culture. But that, I think, is one thing they could do, but I cannot accept that the Chinese government would blow their own head off by destroying the world's economy when they would then suffer extraordinary consequences internally.
Thanks, Chris. The O'Neill household are inquiring as what's the public debt in China?
Well, if you've got a dart and throw it at the board and put a figure, you can, that's as good as I would give you. I've looked up figures, and on this area, it is very difficult. What's called the shadow banking economy, where above the normal banks, which have got all that money I mentioned before, underneath, and those banks are regulated by the central bank in China with rules and regulations. What is growing up underneath is the shadow banking, where if you can't get a loan from the formal, what we'd call a normal bank, there are all of these people operating shadow banks, shadow arrangements. And getting figures on those is very hard, because that's what they call shadow banks. They don't really tell. But I've heard, the thing I just say, Pete, is that for over 15 years now, I've had every year, there's been endless stories from Western economists that China will blow up. The economy will collapse. There'll be mass debt. People will be thrown out of their houses, the whole thing. I've heard that endlessly for 15 years. It hasn't happened because whether for good, bad or ugly, the command economy of the Chinese government is quite sophisticated in understanding these things and of course keeps adjusting their policies. And of course they have the draconian power to impose it on their own country. They will close, like 3 years ago, to reduce coal pollution from coal operators. They closed 200 by decree, 200 small Chinese coal mines across China, particularly in the north, were just forced to close. They just closed them down. You couldn't do that in Australia. You can do that in China, and it's bad luck for it. So I can't give you the figure. All I know is on one side, the World Bank, IMF, and various bodies recognise that the Chinese example of what they've got in deposits in the main banking system is significantly big. One last thing about China and about figures. I never accepted all those figures that every year they had 7, 8, 9% growth, because I don't think the Communist Party is very good at measuring. They're very good at measuring how many tractors come out of a factory every day, but how many haircuts in a women's salon are done. They don't know how to collect the statistics in the services area, and you've only got to walk through any major city of China to see the number of beauty parlours, hairdressers and everything like that are on every street. And you ask the Chinese officials how many, well, how much is it worth in the GDP? They start mumbling. They really don't have the ability. We might not be good at it, but they're worse at it. So I don't know. All I can say is for 15 years, I've heard every year a prediction is going to collapse. The opposite has happened. It's continued to grow. And remember, when the Chinese economy grows at 3 or 4% now per year, that's a bigger growth in creating wealth than 10 years ago when it was growing at 10%, because the size of the economy is so much bigger.
Chris, we're delighted to have a guest online from the Rotary Club of Burleigh Heads, and Harrison's up there. Harrison asks, would corruption be the failing of the Communist Party instead of a failure to continue economic development? Harrison's under the impression that the CCP's main aspect of legitimacy was continued infrastructure and economic growth.
Well, that's a good question. How much of this corruption is endemic to a one-party state system, where if you get the right bribe and the right person who's got the unfettered power to make a decision, and you give them a bribe or whatever the favour is and they give it to you. So there is not proper even-handed competition, people getting an equal chance. The Chinese people over the last 2 decades, at a personal level, at a banquet or a private party, a few drinks and a meal, they start opening up a bit. You ask them about what we have in Australia, free elections. They sort of nod, yeah, but the big thing they complain about is the corruption and the failure for ordinary people to get a fair shake. For example, if you're a member of the Communist Party, you get a better deal to choose your school to go to, get a better chance to get a job, and your family if you're a senior official. But that's only 85 million out of 1.3 billion. What they really complain about is, how do we get an equal go ourselves, if we work hard, do our thing, that we can get an equal chance for our children and ourselves. That's the biggest complaint privately that they will say, and even members of the party agree. It is a difficult issue, and the corruption. But conversely, those same people who want more freedom to get economic opportunities, etc., education, access to better health, etc., also recognise that in the last 30 years, in their living memory of their life, China has just been changed 1,000%. They have, from 30 years ago in their flat, they've got a 2-bedroom flat compared with a mud brick house. They've got a refrigerator, a TV, a washing machine, an air conditioner. They've also they're also close to getting a car, if not got a motorbike. And they can entertain. They've got enough income after they pay for the basics to entertain themselves, etc. They put that in the way as well, even though they don't like aspects of the party and its corruption and its inequality. They recognise, compared with what was there before 1980, they are all, most of them are immeasurably better off.
Chris, we've got a question from our good friend Amal from Sri Lanka. Amal asks, given the interest by the Chinese government to educate their people, do you think they'll replace the number of students coming to countries like Australia, the US and the UK by developing their own local capacity? How ready and capable are they to do this?
Well, a few years ago, I sat on the council of Adelaide University, and the Chinese students are the biggest number of foreign students at the university. And what they pay for full fees are the difference between the university going broke and surviving. There's no argument about that. And why they want to come to Australia or America or the West, Chinese families know that at the moment you get a degree in a Western university, it's got better recognition even in China for a job than you have from a local university. But the university quality in China in the technical area, like engineering, computers, all of those sort of things, medical research, is rapidly improved and coming to the level of Western universities. The problem is, for the party, a university's got to have a culture of argument, dissent, people arguing about all sorts of ideas, including politics, society. And of course, you get these people start arguing about how the party operates or doesn't, about democracy. That's what they're worried about. And I've noticed when Australian universities get invited to join and develop a faculty in a Chinese university anywhere in China, the biggest issue they run into is the control over what is said in the lectures about, and particularly, and you might call the social sciences. If it's sticking to engineering, how to build a bridge better, the Chinese government's not, they want that. But they don't want the universities to become clearly a hotbed of dissent, as what proved in 1989 in the Tiananmen Square. It was the university students, many of them children of the leadership of the Communist Party in Beijing, who were on the streets demanding change. That Tiananmen Square scared the hell out of the Communist Party. That even our own kids were in the streets demonstrating, and that's why the clamp is so strong. But their education system technically is getting better and better. And I had one a university student doing his PhD at Adelaide tell me it'll take maybe another 10 to 15 years, and in a lot of areas, universities in China will be providing courses that are the equal of what we have in the West. But he said in the meantime, a lot of Chinese people like him want to study in the West because they get a better education, a better recognition of the standard for it. But in the long run, the Chinese Communist Party has got this problem. You want to keep growing your economy to be the biggest and best and most modern in the world, so you have you dominate large parts of the world. But to do so, you need all the best brains in your country to be unfettered, to find new ideas, new development, etc. And of course, that is a critique that worries the people who run the Communist Party.
Two last quick questions. David Egan asks, what do you see as the future for Taiwan?
Geez, that's another good question. The China, so long as Taiwan accepts, I'll put it the other way. you have to go back in history. When Taiwan, Chiang Kai-shek fled there after 49, Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong agreed on one thing. Taiwan and mainland China were one country. It was just which one of them was going to run it, Mao or Chiang. But they both agreed. For example, Chiang Kai-shek never supported any independence for Tibet. He just said Tibet's part of China. It's just I want to run China, not Mao, not the communists. So now we have us in the threat internally in Taiwan is that the person who's just been elected president recently, a few months ago, they want to have ongoing free elections in Taiwan, and they want to form, in the end, to be independent from mainland China. This is one issue the Chinese Communist Party will not shift an inch on. They are happy to have, what's it called, one country, three systems. Hong Kong was one, Taiwan was the other. But they must accept that they are part of the hegemony and legitimacy of the whole of China. They are not a separate country. So long as if the Taiwan government declared independence, that they were completely independent and accepted they were no way connected to China, I think that would be really a big threat of instability. And I think one of the reasons the argument of the Chinese are in the South China Sea is to make those bases there an example to say, well, that's close to Taiwan. Taiwan, you're part of us. In the long run, though, the investment from Taiwan into China is massive. And conversely, a lot of Chinese businesses, and with the support of the party, are investing in Taiwan. The economic connections between the two are much, much stronger than the politicians will admit to.
Chris, you've answered partly a question from Steve Larkins, so we might finish it there. That was fascinating, I believe, and I think everybody else probably feels the same way. Paul Denver recommended a book to me that Merv Chappell recommended to him called Changing China. It's a really quite a thick tome, but it really, really explains the whole concept of playing the long game. And so with that, and with your terrific insights today, I'm going to hold up, as a thank you, a certificate of appreciation. A donation's being made in your name to help end polio.
Thank you. And if I could just, I just want to say, I'll end one very short anecdote. Back in 1989, on the 200th anniversary of the fall of the Bastille, the French Revolution, the French president asked Deng Xiaoping, what do you think is the impact of the French Revolution on the world? And his response was, it's still too early to tell. And that gives you, if that anecdote is true in a way, it shows the long game of China for 5,000 years, that 200 years, and as one China just said, up until about 1780, China had the world's biggest economy for 2,000 years. They dropped. He said, we're now going back to being where we always should be, the world's biggest economy. And that is a nationalist view, not just a communist view. I appreciate, and thanks for the certificate.
Chris, I can ask everybody to, or Adria can unmute everybody on their microphones, please. Can everybody unmute?
Yep.
Right. If everybody's unmuted, can I ask everybody in the usual way to thank Chris for giving up his time today, battling with technology.
Did someone check Craig Moffat's okay there? iPad 4, come in.
It's his afternoon nap time.
iPad 4 come.
I said I'm going to mute you all and unmute myself. Yeah, I was going to pick up on Craig. I'd noticed he dozed off, and we'd lost him at some point. But that's nothing unusual. We experience that sometimes in our regular lunches too. So I've been part of at the tables, which is a bit more, I would have thought that's more normal what's happened in here. Thank you very much, Chris, for your informative and inspiring address, and above all for having been part of our very first online meeting of the Rotary Club of Adelaide. And we of course hope that this is one of many, but this was the first one, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
I also special thank you to everyone else that's participated to this meeting, all the guests, but also our own members for supporting it today. Fantastic. At some point we had over 50, we had 52, 53 people, and that's to me a clear sign that there is a future for us in this at the moment. And on that, please watch your email inbox for news on next week. We had cancelled our guest speaker, and we might have to recontact them, obviously, and reapproach them to see where to from here. I would also appreciate an email back from you sent to president@adelaiderotary.com.au with your own personal feedback on what you thought of today, and if we should keep going in this direction, or any other feedback in terms of improving it, changing it, or what. Before closing today's meeting, I'm going to now hand over to Jyoti. I'm just going to unmute Jyoti, but I guess, Jyoti, you can unmute yourself as well. And
Yes.
okay.
Hi,
So,
I just wanted to, before we end this meeting, would it be possible to sing happy birthday for Lisa? Because I'm recording this and I can edit all of this into iMovie as well. So that would be wonderful. Or we can just say happy birthday, Lisa, all together, or sing. What would you prefer?
We'll sing, Jyoti. We'll sing.
All right.
The tenor speaks.
All right. So
I unmute all.
Yep. Unmute everyone.
Yep, already done.
Okay.
So let's start on this tone. Happy birthday. I will count it in. So 3, 2, 1, and we're all going to sing together. All right. If it's not like in sync, that's fine. All right.
Okay.
Ready, ready, ready. So 3, 2, 1.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lisa. Happy birthday to you.
Hooray!
Right.
Was she born so beautiful?
That's enough, Mildy. That's enough.
Oh, that was wonderful.
Well done.
Okay, I've muted you all. I will now close today's meeting. Thank you for being with us, and we hope to see you all back next week. Stay safe and goodbye. I'm gonna unmute you all. If you want to stay back and chat, you can.
Can we have a special thanks to Graham Fusson for getting Chris online, please?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Graham. Thank you so much.